On today's episode, we are going to look at how to manage iPads within Intune for Education. We know that many schools own iPads and issue iPads to students and staff for various reasons, whether for learning or data entry or other things. And there's a need to manage those devices. Many schools rely on some MDM solutions today. Other schools don't have any MDM solution. So in today's conversation with our Ask the Expert, Ravi, we are going to ask him about how we can manage iPads inside of Intune for Education and why that's important, makes sense both economically as well as just logistically, and how to start that process. So with no further ado, let's get started. All right. Welcome. Hello, Ravi. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us what you do at Microsoft?
Absolutely. My name is Ravi Ashok. I'm a program manager on the Intune for Education team. So I work on the engineering team that builds device management software focused for schools, districts, universities. And basically, my job is to figure out, identify, the key requirements that our education customers have for their device management needs and make sure that those things get driven into the product so that our customers can be successful in the education space.
I know, Ravi, you are designing a lot of this stuff, but you are also extremely customer focused. I think we've been on site together with numerous customers setting up devices. I think I hotspotted off of your Android in Boston once to enroll a couple devices. So even though you're designing a lot of it, you're also living it, which is very cool. So we know that schools are supporting many devices on many platforms. It's kind of a mixed bag today. How does Intune for Education really help this?
That's a great question, Joe. Intune for Education was born out of a laser focus on the education space. And what I mean by that is, Intune as a product has been around for quite some time, almost a decade at this point. And it really focused on being good at managing devices of all kinds, iOS, Android, Windows, in the enterprise space. And when we looked at education and we realized that there was a need for a really simplified, streamlined device management solution for education customers, we realized that we have this wealth of rich tools and capabilities in the Intune product. And we saw this great opportunity to take that, distill that, process that, and like I said, streamline that for something that's very focused for education. And in that sense, we've had this great opportunity to build off of an established, strong, well-functioning product, and then sort of take it over to education and make sure that customers can be successful there.
So with this, there's a lot of iPads in education. I think as a former teacher, we were buying thousands of them in 2008. It was the start of our transition to one-to-one, right? There was iPads and PCs, and there was just all of this. And our larger schools are managing their iPads, right? Our smaller schools might not be managing them at all. So if there's an unmanaged iPad out there and they're starting to get concerned about controls, access, security, data privacy, all the things that are really important and have been kind of spotlighted over the last couple of years, what does a school need to do to start managing unmanaged iPads in Intune?
Great question again, Joe. I think the first thing to think about there is, find out what those unmanaged iPads are, how many you have. Inventorying is always a good idea, just to figure out what does the lay of the land look like, right? And from there, there are actually a few options depending on the model of iPad that you have and the software that it's running. There are options that allow you to actually register that device in Apple School Manager, which is sort of the main place for you to manage iOS and Mac devices on the Apple side and sort of inventory them and get them together. And once you've taken that step and you have, say, the serial numbers for some of your devices registered in Apple School Manager, it actually takes about, 10 to 15 minutes to set up the right things that you need in Intune for Education, sync those serial numbers over, and reset those devices, turn them back on, and enroll them and start managing them. And at the very least, what it gives you is a place where all of your devices are listed together. You have a sense of what these devices are and perhaps what they're being used for. And it's a great opportunity to take some of these devices that you might not have that oversight and control over at the moment, and sort of bring that into the modern space. Now, there's also always options to look at in terms of updating devices or sort of updating the fleet depending on how old the devices are. But once you complete that inventorying phase and sort of consider your options for bringing them into Apple School Manager, the possibilities really begin with Intune from there.
And I think schools, when they think of management, are thinking on-prem. Right, hear all these stories of students having to drive back to school because they're learning remotely in order to get an update. If a iPad is managed in Intune for Education, as long as that iPad has an internet connection, it can get those updates, correct?
That's absolutely correct. Intune is a cloud-based service, and yeah, I've never had to set up any sort of on-prem infrastructure for any of my testing. And it's exactly as you say. As long as the device has an internet connection, once you've enrolled it in Intune, you can control and manage that with Intune, push apps, manage settings, etc.
Awesome. So in addition to unmanaged iPads, which there's a lot of them in the world, there's also many managed iPads already out there that are managed by third-party MDM solutions. So many MDMs that are costing the school money. One of the benefits of Intune for Education is that it's bundled in the school's Microsoft agreement. So many schools already own this, just are unaware that they own it. Right, so that's so besides the fact that they probably already own this solution, what sets Intune for Education apart when it comes to iOS management?
So I think one thing to think about there is a dream that a lot of folks in IT talk about, both in enterprise and in the education space, and that dream, I think, is encapsulated in this term that sometimes we hear called the single pane of glass. And what that really is one place for someone in IT to go that where they can see everything in their environment, manage everything in their environment. Like you mentioned, Intune is probably already bundled with several other Microsoft services that a customer is already using. And so if within the Microsoft ecosystem, if you will, if an IT device manager can go to one place where they can see their Windows devices, their iOS devices, perhaps even other platforms like Android, Intune becomes a very compelling solution in that sense because it offers those capabilities. Now, on top of that, we've built Intune for Education, which again takes advantage of the full functionality of Intune, but streamlines it, distills it, and makes it really, really easy for you to get set up and focus on how you set up your devices specifically in the education space. When you take that and pair it with the robust and rich tool set that comes with Intune and its ability to manage all these different device platforms, I think you have a very compelling solution within the Microsoft package that lets you, again, just go to one place, learn how to use one set of controls and capabilities, and have that oversight and control over your whole fleet of devices, sort of iOS, Windows, and potentially beyond.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting scenario there where we have some customers that will start using Intune for Education just to manage their iPads. And then they're like, wow, on-off buttons to manage these iPads. I can do that with Windows 10. I'm going to try that out for my Windows devices. And then for schools that are saying, hey, I'm just going to try my Windows devices, and they're in Intune for Education, they're like, whoa, I can now go inside of Intune for Education and also manage these iPads with similar settings, the same interface, one login to remember, one ecosystem that obviously makes it more secure because there's one identity, there's one pane, and again, ease and efficiency, because our school IT leaders are managing so much. We don't want the bulk of their time to be figuring out how to configure a wallpaper, right? So,
Absolutely.
I hate to put you on the spot, but can you give us a quick walkthrough of some of these iOS settings in Intune for Education? I think oftentimes we talk about it, we get people really excited, and we don't show them exactly what it looks like, right? We have to give them proof that they actually are on-off buttons. They're actually easy, simple, and kind of intuitive of how they're laid out.
Right. Absolutely. I'd be glad to. Let me just go ahead and share my screen here. And let me know when that comes up.
We are seeing your screen.
Excellent. So what you're looking at here is the Intune for Education settings page. And so basically, one of the main ways for you to manage your devices in Intune for Education is to create groups for them and apply various settings and deploy applications to those different groups. And so what you're looking at here is the settings page for the all devices group, right? It's really common for customers across the board to have either a basic set of sort of default settings that they kind of like to apply across the board to all of their devices, or you might even have most of your settings that you say apply to all devices, and you end up creating specific groups for some of your more specific needs down the line. And so looking at the all devices group, you can see how easy it is to take a look and apply some key settings. So I'm going to collapse the Windows device settings section here, which, by the way, that's kind of what I was talking about in terms of that single pane of glass. Here's one place for you to manage settings for both Windows and iOS. Now, all I have to do to apply different settings to this group are just expand these sections and go ahead and block or unblock whatever it is that I'd like to enforce. So for example, you can see on this group, I've already blocked access to the App Store for end users. This allows me to really control the story of what goes on those devices in terms of apps that are getting installed. Apps that I push from Intune get installed on the devices that I'm managing, and end users can't access the App Store in order to install apps of their own. And all I had to do to block that was flip a single switch. Similarly, I can enforce some of the others, settings that you find in the App Store by just turning them on. Very, very simple. And as I click through these settings, I might want to block, say FaceTime. I might want to block Game Center because as fun as Fortnite is, I don't know if I want my students and my teachers spending their class time engaging in that. And so, again, enforcing these device restrictions is as easy as going through the list, perhaps even searching for a setting that I already know that I'm looking for, and really just turning things on and off as I need them. And once I'm done, once I've taken a look, I can just click save here, and these settings are applied, and they're going down to the devices that I'm managing as we speak.
So let's say the customer is coming from a different MDM. Are these buttons going to be completely different, or are they going to be somewhat similar? Like, is this a new language for them to learn?
That's a great question, Joe. And generally speaking, especially as far as iOS is concerned, they shouldn't be having to wrap their heads around a whole new system or anything like that. There's a rich catalog of settings that iOS supports for MDMs to manage, and Intune, makes its best effort to stay up to date and offer the latest and greatest of all of those settings. And so, the settings and capabilities and the restrictions that an admin is used to seeing in other MDMs should be very similarly reflected here in Intune for Education, as well as the broader Intune product.
Well, this is awesome and fantastic, and I think really solves a lot of problems that we have. We have students and staff working remotely. We need a remote way to manage devices, whether Windows devices or iOS devices, in a simplified portal. We can also manage Macs as well as some Android cell phones and more device platforms inside of Microsoft Endpoint Manager. If you own one, you automatically own the other. Those are talking to each other. They're sharing settings back and forth. But specific to iPads, there's so many iPads wild in the ecosystem. And if you get audited and you're asked, where are your devices? What are you doing with them? How are you managing them? many of our IT directors are going to be quite scared, where here's a way to centrally manage them, to push some applications, to push some policies. I was at one school where they decided that they were going to manage iPads in Intune for Education, and it was a day-long project for them to do, right? They're like, all right, these are the bare minimum policies, and we're just going to go and do it, right? And they got it all done in a day, and that's not a time frame that we're used to with technology. We're used to, experimenting, building, planning, scoping, right? There's all these terms that really equal delay, and now we don't have to worry about that. And that's the awesomeness of the MDM style solution of these simplified switches that you can, of course, go more complex, right? So there's a limited amount of switches inside of Intune for Education. You can go into Microsoft Endpoint Manager if you need more switches, right? That's what they could do.
That's absolutely correct. Exactly like you mentioned, Microsoft Endpoint Manager and Intune for Education, they're talking to each other, they're manipulating the same data. And so, Intune for Education is a great place for you to look at for that, basic to intermediate, level of settings that you might need to enforce on your devices. But anytime you need to step beyond that, Endpoint Manager is available to you as an admin to go configure perhaps more complex settings. And again, these things will live in harmony with each other. And so it's a great opportunity for you as an admin to pick and choose the tool that best meets your needs and your wants, perhaps even in the moment. It's really easy to switch between them, as you said.
So partners out there, most of your customers, the schools that you are working with, already own this solution. You can go into these schools and save them a lot of money and say, you don't need to continue paying for that other MDM solution. You already own Intune for Education. Let me demo it for you so you can see it's very similar in what it can do, and it's all in one spot. And as Ravi's saying, it's moving towards a single pane of glass. And you as a partner are the hero, because even though you're going to charge for your service, at the end of the day, you're saving them money every single year going forward. And that has huge value. It makes things simple for the customer, and it helps with tight budgets that we know are happening right now as a result of some of this work from home, learn from home activity. So Ravi, thank you so much for joining. I think we're all better off for it. I think we all learned something. I'm really excited about just how much has grown in the iOS management of Intune for Education. It seems like, quarterly there's some new features that are being added, and all of those features are the result of Ravi getting to talk to teachers, students, people working with teachers and students to make sure that the features that he adds into the product make sense and answer the questions or the needs. So if you have any ideas or things you'd like to see, please leave them in the comments. Ravi, thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, Joe. Thank you so much for having me. This is, as you say, appreciate being here.